Matt Hill, thanks for coming in today.
Pleasure.
To tell us about what you're doing and what's going on a bit further afield from Bristol. So, for those that don't know what Systema is, maybe you can give us a bit of a background and what it is and what it involves.
Sure. So Systema is a European, predominantly Russian-based or origin martial art. About 10 centuries old, comes from the battlefields of Russia, Europe, and kind of came through their cultural nights kind of background through Russia's history, and then when the Soviet era came in, they kind of outlawed a lot of cultural customs, and Systema was one of them. So it's the martial art of the Cossacks and the knights, that kind of thing. So it kind of moved and evolved pretty much up until modern times. There was a big blip during the Soviet period when they kind of outlawed that, the Orthodox Church and the traditional customs, and then but there's certain things that are of value to them they kept, and Systema they kept, but kept in certain places that they wanted. So they used it in the special forces then in Russia, and there's a bit of a misnomer here. People think that it was the Spetsnaz, where it was more the kind of intelligence services, and that had a bit of a bearing on kind of how Systema evolved too. So yeah, that's his background, and it's pretty old. Came from the battlefield, so pretty traditional approaches to weapons, hand-to-hand combat, but it's kind of evolved through time into modern day too.
So is it something that's had like European influence or like Asian influence, or has it just kind of come out on its own?
Well, I guess it's kind of mix of all three, really.
Okay.
It's had Russia was in close proximity to most of the world. The size of Russia, so it had China and the Far East there, and then the Mongol Empire, the Middle East, the battlefields of Europe. So it kind of had to have a fighting style that was very adaptable across a lot of different terrain: horseback, mountainous, desert, rolling countryside, woods, and then against a lot of different types of opponents. So they had to have something that wasn't a set way but was quite adaptable to any way, but also clearly they would have picked up influences from people they fought. So Systema's kind of doesn't hold to any particular type of style or movement. It's a very natural based approach, so it looks for natural responses, natural movement, but there's a couple of key principles that you focus on and use in practice that kind of open things up for you. So there's really only 4 principles in Systema. It's really looks closely at how you breathe, how you move, how well you can relax and stay calm, and how you manage your body position, your posture, your structure in any kind of given situation. And really, that's true posture. A lot of people think posture is, shoulders back, chest out, knees locked. But actually, posture is being ready, optimally ready for the next movement. And so it looks, keeps you noticing those things. And for me, what it really does is build your operating system. So if you want to add other things onto it, do other things, then that's great. But those 4 things really constitutes a very effective operating system. So yeah,
it's good. So can you tell us a bit about yourself? So like what your involvement is with Systema, and maybe stuff you've done before.
Yeah, so now I run a full-time Systema group in Wiltshire, Systema Academy. So I've been doing that for about 3 years. I run about 10 classes a week and privates, and I run courses, host courses with other teachers. So pretty active there. I run so Systema lends itself very well to people that probably would never in a million years walk in the door of a martial arts gym. So I teach Systema Health and Systema Self-Defense or Combat, and the two things, the two people, often there's crossover between the two groups. The fighters want to come and learn to move better, and sometimes the people that come in just to learn to move better get kind of curious and want to come along and try it, which is great. It's great to have that healthy crossover. But Systema really is pretty unique in that it comes from health into combat. Lots of sports, especially combat sports and martial arts, they kind of only think about their health when they break.
Yeah.
Like we were talking earlier, you break and you think, right, how do I get better? How do I kind of heal myself? And how do I prevent that happening again? But Systema kind of comes from first teach you how to move properly, teaches you how to relax, stay calm, which helps your mental, emotional health, and from that, healthy perspective, healthy place, then you go into taking that into to combat, performance, sport, whatever you kind of want to do with it. So that's what I do in Melksham. My background, I've always been interested in martial arts, even before I knew what they were. I was the kid that was running around the forest with a made-up bow and arrow and a sword, rolling down hills and jumping out of trees, and having mock fights, pretending to be King Arthur or Robin Hood, And I grew up in the 70s, so I was born in 73, and I then saw stuff like Kung Fu with David Carradine come on the TV and Bruce Lee, and I was like, that's it, that's what I've always been interested in. And then a few years after that, people, clubs started opening up and people started teaching it. I was like, wow, they teach this stuff. So even before I knew what it was, that kind of mind, body, spirit always gelled with me, even before I was able to describe it in those words. Something which gave you skills over and above just physical skills. Yeah. And a philosophy that binds it all up. And so then I started with karate when I was quite young, and then I found Aikido, and I did Aikido in Bristol with Mike Neary. For a long time, got my showdown with him. Then I went to Japan, and I lived in Japan in a very traditional martial arts school for 2.5 years. It was just like you'd imagine, really. For a boy, I was 19 when I went there. It was what I'd always wanted. The only people there were people passionate about doing it and training. It was a farm, so you worked on the farm during the day and you trained in the mornings and evenings. There was a temple that you had to sweep and clean every day, and a training area you had to rake, and a forest nearby. So it was a complete immersion. Yeah. And I was there for 2.5 years. Came back. I'm a 5th dan in Aikido. And then after that, I was always searching, and it was an amazing experience, but there was still stuff I needed to find. So I then joined what's the modern martial arts. I joined the military. I spent a year at Sandhurst, and then I joined the parachute regiment. So I served with them for 6 years, left as a captain, and then through a kind of I didn't practice martial arts while I was in the army. I just didn't have time. I taught it a few times to the guys before we deployed on operations, especially in Northern Ireland stuff, which is shields, hand-to-hand batons, that kind of thing. And then over about a 10-year period, I went back to teaching Aikido, but I'd found Systema while I was in the military. Stan Pranin, who does an Aiki newsletter, had put out a piece on meeting Mikhail Ryabko and Vladimir Vasilyev, and that so he says they were just kind of watching some old videos in the lounge, and someone put on a video of these two guys and said, tell me what you think of this. And they just saw these two guys in tracksuits in an old hotel room doing stuff that just stopped the whole room, and he was intrigued, so he went to see Vladimir, invited him over for one of the Aiki expos, went to train with him, and the piece that he wrote up made me think, I need to go and see these guys, because it pulled together a lot of my background. It was close to Aikido. It was always the philosophy, and still is a philosophy that intrigues me, O-sensei's philosophy and approach. It was military, a lot of outdoor stuff, very practical, very kind of, it didn't just focus on old style uniforms and old style weapons and old style kind of approaches, but blended the two of those things, I think, which is quite healthy. And so I went, and at the bottom of the email there was a link with a course that Mikhail Ryabko was doing, and so I went along to the course, and I was still in the army at the time, and I did, within the first couple of demonstrations he called me up, and it was quite uncanny. He called me up and normally in Aikido, you know, I don't know if you know much about it, but they'll kind of specify the attack and demonstrate a certain technique most of the time. And I said, you know, how do you want me to attack? Because that was my background. He said, doesn't matter really. And I said, how fast? He says, you know, doesn't matter. So I came in with an attack, and I was kind of, first time I think, fairly gently upended and dropped down. I remember looking up and thinking, this is exactly how my teacher must have felt when he first attacked Do-sensei. There's a lovely story that Morihiro Saito wrote about, that's the dojo, the guy that I stayed with in Japan, wrote about when he first met O-sensei and asked to be a student, and you know, he said, no, go away, come back, and did that, and then he said, okay, come on, and he said, come in and punch me, and he came in to punch him, and he kind of gently overturned him, come in and kick me, and he gently overturned him, come in and grabbed me, and he threw him. And he said he'd done, you know, kendo and karate like most Japanese school kids had done, but he had never felt anything like that and didn't realise what had happened to him. And that was exactly the feeling I had when I came in and attacked Mikhail. And I just had a smile on my face. I thought, that must be how he'd felt. You know, it's kind of, I felt a hand reach out and tap me on the head.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi. And I just thought, you know, it was like, kind of real connection back to there, you know, and I thought, wow, you know. And as the seminar went on, we did a lot of interesting stuff, a lot of breathing exercises, a lot of mobility stuff, and stuff that I hadn't really seen before that was quite, felt weird a bit, you know, quite far out, but I felt amazing after it. Yep. Even with getting hit a lot and pushed, but they kind of teach you in Systema very early. The first thing you learn is how to get hit and how to recover. And in fact, Michael says you've got no business sparring unless you know how to recover yourself, how to, you know, clean yourself, as they call it. And so, so yeah, I came away from it and thinking, that's it, you know. But I was in the army still, so it was a while before I came out, and then I worked in crisis management, and some of that took me to South Africa. And there was I thought, you know, I'll have a look if there's a Systema guy. And there's a very good guy called Vadim Dobrin, an ex-Russian paratrooper, who taught Systema full-time there. And I did a lot of private classes and went to all his classes while I was, over a 2-year period, I was probably there for about 10 days every month, so a lot of time. And for a while I just integrated it into Aikido, and because Systema is quite not bound by set rituals or techniques, so you can kind of drop it into everything quite easily, you know. And so people didn't know I was doing Aikido with a lot of Systema in it, but I just used it to open up some of the techniques, get a lot of more free movement, bring strikes in. And then in 2012 I'd had a business that had gone the wrong way, and I used coming out of the back of that as a chance to kind of immerse myself in the study of something. I thought, I'm going to immerse myself in Systema. And every 2 years Vladimir Vasiliev in Canada does a week immersion camp in the forests in the north of Canada, and you do kind of 10, 11, 12 hours a day training for 5 days. So it's quite intense. Days training in the water, so, you know, water work, which I'd never done in martial arts before. You know, what it feels like to get held under, drowned, you know, hit, how to escape from that. You know, work in the forests, and I'd been used to that obviously from the army, but you know, again, a different approach. In the field, you know, weapons, multiple crowd work. Again, I'd never done, apart from, you know, in parachute regiment, done crowd work. But so it was a real eye opener. Obviously, lots of things familiar, but an eye opener in several ways. Number one, I remember the first day I was sat outside on a log somewhere, and Vladimir walked past. I didn't know him, just seen him in videos, you know, and he walked past. He said, "You okay?" He said, "You look really tense, really stressed." I didn't think I did. Clearly I was, because I'd just gone through a very difficult period with the business. But I, you know, I wasn't either sensitive enough or didn't know enough of what proper relaxation feels like to realise just how stressed and tense I was. And I think it's a big problem in society today. You know, most people don't even know what relaxation is, let alone how to achieve it. You know, how to properly, without drinking, or, you know, a lot of the things we talked about earlier. So and that kind of struck me, just walking past and at a glance, A, noticed that, but B, take the time to say it, when there were 100 or 150 odd people there. And so that stuck with me. Then his martial skill was of a level that I'd never come across before. Quite astounding. In that nothing was planned or rehearsed. He'd just call people up and do stuff, and just the precision and the ease with which he did things and dealt with things was quite astounding. But then the thing that you see people like that from time to time in the martial arts world, but the question is, can they teach it? Can they pass it on? Is the question. And there were not everybody by all means, but there were quite a lot of people there at a very high level themselves that I trained with, and thought, okay, it's something that can be passed.
Yeah.
And
it's important.
Yeah, it is. But the other thing was the thing that when I look back now struck me most was I didn't just aspire to have the skill that Blimey had got, but just the calm and the ease and the humanity. That sounds a weird thing to say in a martial art, but just the kind of the type of person that he was. He just kind of relaxation blared out from him and kind of went into the people around him, and so that was very appealing too. And so when I came back then, this was in about 2012, so when I came back I started more openly saying, so this parts of it of what I'm doing is Systema and these parts are Aikido. And then over time I kind of came to a conclusion really that I couldn't ride two horses for much longer. I had to really decide which one I wanted to teach if I really wanted to excel. And it was it took me about 9 months probably to make the decision, and because I had a lot invested in Aikido in terms of time, in terms of friendships, in terms of I was the UK representative for my teacher in Japan and the family, and you've got all the students that came with me, the grades, the gradings, that kind of thing, and but in the end it was quite easy. I woke up one morning and thought, this is the martial art I've been looking for all my life, and so in the end it was quite easy, but the process was a difficult one.
Yeah. So you mentioned your classes where you've got like health classes and martial classes. So if I came to either of those, what could I expect as a student, like walking through the door? What from either?
Yeah.
Like,
firstly, a lot of focused attention on your breathing, and that's not
for both.
For both.
Right. So
that's not just static breathing exercises, which of course are very common, meditation, yoga, that kind of thing. But it's learning how to breathe in a real life way. So learning how to adapt your breathing to pressure, to stress, to both physical and emotional, psychological, and how to use your breath much more functionally, to stay calm and relaxed and at ease in your movement. So a lot of people, for example, when they move, they'll hold their breath, especially if they do something vigorous like lift something or stand up out of a chair. Even people will hold their breath, and every moment that you're holding your breath, you're getting more tired pretty quick. You don't have to hold your breath long doing groundwork to realise how tiring it is. But seconds, a few seconds, in an intense environment. So it's just about making you conscious of continuous breathing, breathing the correct way, and being able to adapt that breathing, which really in a lot of cases means just the speed of your breathing. So intensity increases, emotional intensity increases. An emergency situation, you increase the speed of your breathing. As things settle down, you kind of regulate and lengthen out your breathing, and that solves so many problems. All the people that come to me, either martial arts or health, nearly every time they'll go away and come back and say, I never realised how often I hold my breath in everyday life, and just what a difference it makes. I used to have a lady comes to the health class, still got it, and she came and I taught her the breathing stuff, and initially people think, breathing's breathing, for most people this is automatic as blinking your eyes or digesting, but most people are terrible breathers. And she said, she came back the next week and she said, every week in the course of my work I have to climb this really big flight of stairs, and I've never been able to do it. I always have to stop and catch my breath. This time, just by focusing on my breathing with every step, I got right to the top and didn't even feel it. and just some simple stuff like that. But when you incorporate it with, much more physical and stressful situations like combat, or even getting hit, a lot of people hold their breath when they get hit or when they hit, and not know how to breathe to restore themselves, to recover, and so when you combine it with that, really makes a huge difference. Right, yeah. So yeah, lots of breathing, lots of movement, and lots of variety too. I mean, no two classes are really the same, because there's no techniques, there's no repetition of doing the same thing time in, time out. So you might be on the ground. One day you might be working with sticks, multiple opponents, crowd work, knives. One guy holding you, one guy trying to stab. Just really as much variety as you can get, the better. Both for healthy movement, and then for ability to manage a conflict situation. Because outside of a set environment where there's rules and a ring, no two situations are ever going to be the same. So the more you're used to it never quite being the same, for me, the more useful it can be.
Yeah. I haven't quite worked out this question properly in my head yet, but it's kind of popped into it. So you talked a bit about like the head honcho and the kind of presence he's got, and you get that a lot in different martial arts associations. Now, when that kind of head guy sets up a system, they tend to set up quite a strict syllabus. Yeah. So when they go, the syllabus is still there, and there's very kind of distinct rules that people can follow to maintain what that guy was trying to achieve. Say with Shotokan karate, it's very set with what you want to do. Now, how do you see Systema coping with that as it evolves over time? And because like once the head guy is gone, because of the fluidity that it sounds in its system, how do you keep Systema being what it is, if that's even what we want to do, rather than people just going off with their ideas and it all just getting like a big mess? Like from chatting to you, I think, well, in 20-30 years time I could go to 3 different Systema classes and they'd be completely different.
You can go to 3 different Systema classes now and they're completely different.
Right, okay.
But it's a really good question, and it's something that sort of I kind of saw a bit of an analogy with Aikido, that
well, it sort of happened with them, right?
It absolutely has happened with them, yeah. And they had a kind of a strict kind of syllabus system.
Yeah. Hello, how you doing, right?
I'm good.
Or a kind of, they had a strict-ish syllabus system, and you're right, it's always the case when you get a very capable, pretty unique, charismatic person, what happens next? I mean, Mikhail said, so just to be clear too, the head honcho is, really Mikhail is the kind of the founder of Systema. If you can call it founder, I mean, him and Vladimir came up with the name. Before that it was just called Russian Fighting System. Right. But it didn't have a particular name, they called it the system because they said it needs to be a bit more than just something about fighting, because it's much bigger. Mikhail, a pretty unique guy, just to give you a bit of background on him, he learned Systema from the age of 5. Father was in the army, learned it from his uncle, who was a bodyguard to Stalin, and by 14 he was operational with Spetsnaz. Very distinguished career. Stories about him are kind of legion, and while he was in the army he was kind of known as the go-to guy for empty-handed stuff, fighting, or and so a lot of people came and a lot of people challenged him, and a lot of people became students, and then when the Soviet Union collapsed in the late 80s, he was the guy kind of left holding this mantle and was able to come out and teach it again openly and freely in the communities as it was supposed to have been. And so he says, really, just try and be a good person and everything else will come to you. So that's kind of a philosophy that not bad, and it's an interesting thing about principles and rules, I used to work in crisis management. I did governance as well with a very big company, 450,000 employees around the world. And there's the two philosophies, you know, the rule-based approach, which you try and put a rule, every time something goes wrong you make a rule to make sure it doesn't go wrong. But people always find their way around rules and you know, or the principle-based approach, which is kind of trying not to do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
You know, you can't find a way around that really. So and that's very simplistic, of course, but Systema's principle-based approach kind of, I think, tries to follow that idea that, you know, if you're breathing properly, if you've got continuous movement, you know, if your movement's smooth, constant, never locking you, always keeping you, you know, able to have options, and if you try and focus on the state of your muscle tone, you know, that you're a calm approach, and thinking of your posture, those four things, then it should always kind of look something. But the other thing about it is too, Systema is an approach that tries to find your Systema. So it kind of goes in and then comes out from inside. It comes from the inside out. So most you know, there's no right or wrong, but most teach an external form, and then you try and internalize it through that form. You try and understand your problems and your weak areas and kind of improve yourself through the form. But Systema's kind of the other way. It works on the inside first, and then that kind of flavours and colours everything that you do. And I mean everything that you do, you know, not just a fight situation. So it should be yours, should be natural, should be a natural response to any kind of given situation. Talking about how do you protect the form of Systema, or what Systema is, you know, after those guys. And I think I don't think you can really, you know, but in terms of current and you know, getting the future teachers of Systema ready, they've got a pretty tight quality control. So if you want to be a Systema instructor, so there's no grades or ranks or belts or anything like that, but what there are is instructor qualifications. So you're instructor and trainer first, generally for about 3 years or so, if you have a group, and then after that you can do your instructor qualification, and that's either Vladimir or Michael has to see you and say, yeah, okay, then you're fine. And they just kind of watch you work for a bit and see if you're embodying the principles of Systema.
Right, yeah.
You know, if you're kind of walking around like that, then maybe not. But so, and then you have to see them every year, just to get I mean, you don't have to pay for that. You know, you go on a seminar and then, you know, so it's absolutely not a money-making scheme actually, Systema. You know, in terms of certificates and grades and ranks and things, you pay about 50 quid to get your instructor certificate, and that's it then.
Right.
Yeah.
Good.
So yeah.
So just on a final note, can you tell us a bit more about your club in Melksham and like where it is and when it is and etc.
Yeah, so it's a full-time club in Melksham. I teach on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, but there's private sessions that go on around that. Do regular courses. Evening classes generally start at 6:15. They're generally the junior and the health ones, and then full adult classes start at 7:30. Saturday mornings is 9 o'clock. Anyone that's interested, just drop me a line. The website is www.matthill.co.uk.
Right along the bottom.
Yeah, and the email is matt@matthill.co.uk. I've got 2 Systema books out. Maybe this would be a good chance to just show them, flash them with it. If I get them at the car.
I'll put
a link or something.
Yeah, I'll put one up here, like a box
great.
of
Alright, great.
image. And we'll put a link to it.
Great. So I've got 2 books out. One on Systema Health, so for people that just want to learn to be calm and more relaxed, more mobile, move with more ease and fluidity, you know, get rid of the aches and pains of life, then that one's really useful. But also, you know, a really useful intro into Systema. And then I've got a Systema Combat book, which gives, and both of them give respectively 25 sort of drills, exercises that anyone can do anywhere, to kind of get a better understanding of this.
Yeah, good. Well, good luck with it.
Thank you.
Take it easy. Cheers for coming in.
Cheers, Doug. Thank you very much.
really good chatting to Matt Hill and get a real insight into Systema, some of the background, and also some of the training weeks away that they do. It's a very different style of training to a lot of other martial arts, so it's really fascinating. If you want more interviews like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel by clicking right here, or visit the martial arts shop here and see all the products we have for sale by clicking right here. Hopefully see you soon. Cheers, bye.